Hi, welcome back to the Strange Orphan Podcast. I'm so glad you're here. It's me, Laura Stenell. I'm back. Last week I had a doozy of a cold. I was knocked out pretty hard. And it was either like do the podcast in a bathrobe with like green goo coming out of my eyes, or just take a week off. And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take a week off. The world doesn't need more horrors on their phone. So yeah, I'm back in action. Feeling a lot better. Still a little puffy, but I have a small face, and puffiness has just always been a dragon I've had to slay my whole life. What are you gonna do about it? You know what? I'm grateful for my puffiness. If that's what is gonna be thrown on my plate as my burden, I'll take it. That's a burden I'm fine with. You just do a lot of gua sha and drink a lot of fluids. Anyway, we're back. We're back in action. Unfortunately, there's too much action in the world, and so this week I was thinking it'd be really good to discuss. I wanted to talk about creativity. Randomly enough, not only because I think it's going to be our creative lives that save us over the next couple of I really wanted to say months there, but it feels like it's going to be a little bit longer. Creativity is something. So I've had a complete overhaul in my creative life, and if you know anything about me, like my whole life was devoted to my work, and my work was really creative. And over the past 5 years, I've just sort of had a crumbling of in my creative landscape. And what I've found that the way I was approaching creativity was like all wrong. And then the more I dug into that, the more I found that the rules that apply to creativity are the same rules that apply to life. And so I thought it would be kind of interesting to talk about the comparison between the two. And by the way, you don't have to be in a creative field to have a creative life, or to keep listening to this episode. I think what I'm going to try and sell you on is that in every individual way, in all of our lives, creativity is sort of this dance with the unknown that we're doing all the time. And it's more about a way of approaching your life than it is about what you do for an occupation. And so I definitely think it's worth talking about, because I think this might be our life vest through the next however long journey that we're in this geopolitical landscape we're in. So yeah, creativity is a biggie for me. Creativity has always sort of been my method for how I understand myself. I think when you come out of a landscape, as I did, I didn't have the tools to process my emotions firsthand. They were too big. And so what I would do is I would put them onto characters. And I would vicariously, secondhand, feel my feelings. And that was easier that way. It was great because, it was Lucy going through something, not necessarily Laura. And that worked for a really long time until it stopped working. Well, I guess ever since really the foundational dissolve of cutting ties from my family, I found that a lot of my methods for processing my grief no longer applied. And a lot of these like vicarious third-party systems I had set up to deal with my life and to deal with myself, they weren't functioning anymore. Like they were no longer tenable. When this sort of familial dissolve happened, I also had a complete crumbling of, it's people don't tell you when you break up with your family, a lot of your life breaks apart. And not only did I lose my family, I lost my old version of my life, and I lost my old version of myself, which contained my creative toolbox. I sort of got crumbled over the past 5 years. And in this process, my creative toolkit was taken away. And I believe this happened because it was a coping mechanism in a lot of ways. If you come from a crazy enough house, you're not just highly creative, you're also disassociating. It's probably not funny. It's not funny because it's how I survived trauma. But hey, it worked for a really long time. Fantasy was like my bread and butter. I loved fantasy. It was great. Fantasy was like how I survived my upbringing. And so within these worlds I created, there was always this like, you go somewhere else, you go to another place. And so you build that muscle. And then when you start to heal, that muscle, it goes away. Like your armor kind of gets taken away when you start to fully face head on what you've experienced. And so it was really traumatizing for me because fantasy was always how like escapism and disassociation was always how I moved through the world. I mean, I liked it. I really liked it. I don't think it was, I mean, who's to say? What's the difference between manifestation and delusion and fantasy and disassociation? They're very thin lines. We're talking like, these are differential to a degree. I don't know. I think we all need a little bit of delusion and fantasy to get through life. I had it in high degrees, but I just called myself creative. Disassociation is just like high octane creativity. You know, they say you can't be creative in survival mode, but I think you can. I took it to the max. I took disassociation to the max. And what's really interesting is that it was how I got through the craziest years of my upbringing. And then it was exactly, again, it kicked in after I cut ties from my family because it was like this old coping mechanism. And then when COVID struck and I was alone with myself as a family of one, I wrote a screenplay. Okay, so this will tell you a lot about me. When I moved to the UK, I moved there with a show I had pitched and set up called Daddy, which was a creative way to like exercise my father wounds. And I was really proud of it. It's a good script and we were really happy with it. We sold it to Sky TV and I thought all cylinders were go. The thing about the UK though is that it takes like a very long time to get things up and running. They have a very long dithering process that they like to dither over things endlessly until they give it a green light and then smash that green light into a red light. But how I managed to make it very unhealthy for myself was that during that period of what meant they call it, where it's just they're deliberating endlessly about what the show will be. I don't know what they're even talking about. You just like sit at home and wait for a call that you have money to make it. And that went on for 3 years. But over the course of those 3 years, I was so kind of like delusional that it would get made. Like so confident in my creative manifestations that I just seeped into, I sort of disassociated into like the character of the show. So as I was writing the show, I was slowly becoming the character. And this is dangerous because the character has a massive father wound, as do I. But the lines of reality were blurred between me and this character. And I want to say I was exercising something, but really I was just like slipping into this world. It was almost like my creativity didn't know a boundary. It was like, no, we live here now. Like, you've made this show. Let's make it real. And I just kept wanting to live there. But that got really unhealthy after a while. I'm sure you can understand why. I'm just like, I lost the plot. I gained an arc. I gained a character arc, but I sort of lost the plot on my life. And so I think when I would say that's an unhealthy approach to to creativity. It's like you got to pull yourself back at some point. You got to get out of that deep disassociation ocean. But I don't know. I think there's probably a lot of artists that don't know how to come out of whatever version of a world they're in. There's a lot of creeps. Picasso was a big creep. Didn't he have his like child face? Like, there's a lot of creepy artists that get away with it. Why can't I be a little creepy? Why can't I go after dads? They're at least adults. And yeah, and then when the show wound up falling apart, as karmically it was bound to happen, you can't have your daddy and eat it too. You can't have daddy and eat it too. Yeah, I just turned into like a soggy, like coming back from that was, I actually went into a state of like freeze because I was so embedded in that world psychologically of like my creative storyline of my show that like being in my real life with my real visa being revoked and not having anywhere to live and being kicked back to the States, I didn't know how to handle that. Like I was still in my mind and heart, I was still in a Selfridge's men's department. It got so bad at one point. When my show was dying, I could tell. Like there was a week where we were like, I don't think we're going to shoot next week. And I accidentally ate raw chicken. I don't know how I did it. Okay, I do know how. And it's Waitrose's fault. Waitrose is a grocery store in the UK. And they should be brought up on charges of negligence. They have packaged, this is for my British friends out there. And I want my British friends to tell me if this is insane because I did it. And I don't know if anyone else has done this. They sell. First of all, Waitrose is like organized insanely. You don't know what is packaged food and what is raw food. And like the raw chicken is like right next to like sandwiches, like a meal deal, grab and go. I went in there one day in a tizzy. My show is falling apart. I'm falling apart. I'm moving fast. I'm not thinking. I'm just shoving things I'm on the phone and I pick up a pack of like fried chicken fingers, but they're not fried all the way through. They're raw chicken fingers but that look cooked. So I just like shove one down my gullet, barely chew it, swallow it, and then I look inside. I'm like, that was really soft and it was raw, and I was like, oh god, oh, this is awful. I think Waitrose should be, I just wonder if anyone else has done that because I can't be the only person. They're on nowhere on that box, on the packaging, did it say, by the way, guys, careful, this is raw food. Nowhere. That feels wrong. It feels illegal. It feels like someone should do something about that. So I'm going to put Waitrose on blast because that messed me up big time. And then I just spent the following week like in a fever dream wandering out to Hampstead Heath like I was a Victorian ghost child. Like making calls to producers being like, we need to save this with like 104-degree fever. I was like Jane Eyre. So I'd say that's not a great approach to creativity. I'd say we need a different approach. I would say, so but basically when my whole show collapsed, and so did I, by the way, salmonella poisoning is no joke. When my show collapsed, a lot of my creative tentpoles also collapsed because in that happening, I had to face a lot of grief. I had to face you got to face the music. You got to face why you ran there with a hope and a dream for a daddy. And in doing that, my creativity drastically, when you're in grief, I mean, you can be creative, but I think the grief takes center stage. And you're dealing with the reality of right now, right here, right now. This agonizing reality that I'm in, of my life just getting ejected out of the tape deck. And so when that started happening, you can't be in fantasy mode anymore. I mean, I wanted to. but it wasn't gonna help me get my life together. So, in all of that happening, what also occurred was that, like, my creative armor, my disassociation, it kind of rusted off, and I had to find a new way to A, approach life that was more healthy, and B, approach my creativity in a way that was more healthy. But when something has been your life raft for so long, and how you come to understand yourself in the world, when that's like taken away and deflated and thrown off the side of a boat, how do you navigate the world? And how do you come to now know and understand yourself in a new way? And so there are sort of some tenets that I have found over the past 5 years or so that have helped me approach both drastically differently. And I think they're pretty valuable. At least they've gotten me through. But I don't think we think about life as a creative act unless you're Rick Rubin, but maybe we should. And I think as the world gets crazier, it's worthwhile talking about these swimmies we can put on of creativity to kind of draw our attention back to what really matters, and to basically to like take our power back. I'll get into all this, but where our attention goes is where our energy flows, and what you give your attention to is pretty sacred, especially these days. These are some thoughts I have on the topic in general. I think the biggest one when it comes to creativity is like, you can't create anything from a state of survival, is what I've found. I think that everything in our life that's worthwhile, that's good, comes from the unknown, and it comes from a state of expansion. And I think when you're in survival, you're in the opposite of all those things. You're in contraction, you're in fear. You are in needing to know how the outcome is going to be. You're not open, you're not receptive, and you're not patient. Like, basically, fear strangles creativity. I learned this firsthand when I came back to the States. It was like, all of a sudden, you just wanted to get a new job, but it's like anything I'm trying to put the pen to paper on right now is not going to be interesting or good. It's going to be pretty fear-based. Although I have read about Dostoevsky, and I also think Gogol. There were a lot of like Russian authors that had to write under the threat of being arrested. I think the brothers Karamazov, I don't know if that's how you say it. I don't know. I think a lot of Russian authors had to write with like the threat of being arrested unless they finished their book, which I think is crazy. That's quite the deadline. That's like a literal deadline. But I can't do it. And what I've found is like, fear is not a good driving force for making anything interesting. What I also found is that like my impulse to constantly uproot was at odds with the need to be situated and stable and calm in order to allow inspiration to come in. If you're always like in a state of upheaval, you're not really getting the greatest downloads. You're in a very like narrow field of view, and you kind of need to be like calm and stable. Good old Virginia Woolf. I think she's such a snob, but if you read like A Room of One's Own, everyone blows that up like, a room of one's own. Yeah. Did they skip over the part where she's like, working class people can never be geniuses? She was such a snob, but what she was saying had truth in it, which was that you need to be well rested and well fed to be able to dance with creativity. She's right about that. Poor people will never be geniuses. It's like, okay, like, chill out. You've had a lot of support, Virginia. You have a room of your own. But the note behind the note there is like, you need to be stable, because you need to allow creativity to dance with you. So you need to be stable and not in a state of lack and survival for that to happen. Because I think one of the root concepts of creativity is just potential. It's just like expansive potential. It's unknown. And when you are trying to outrun some old crazy house and the trauma that you've survived, it's really hard to sit in the unknown. Your nervous system also almost doesn't have the basis for it. That's why, I disassociate it so much. When you're in fear and lack, it's hard to be expansive. It's hard to be open. It's hard to have an antenna to the potentiality of something. You're just bracing for impact all the time. So, yeah, I think getting ourselves out of survival as much as possible is a good idea. And leaning more towards the creative part of the brain, even when things are uncertain. It's still a way you can lean. And I've been trying to lean that way more and more. But first you got to calm down. You got to regulate. Another tip I've learned in this whole process, and this is a big one, this sort of chased me around Los Angeles, is like, don't be a disaster artist. Like, don't sabotage your own stuff, you ding dong. I had such a deep fear of being seen because of shame, because of the shame that gets pumped into you in these crazy homes. I had such a deep fear of being seen that I could make the work. And then when I went to sell it, I would find a way to like kill it. And so you're just in this spiral of like not knowing why you're not progressing out of it. You don't know what's happening. But like I would find something wrong with the deal, or I would find something wrong with the production company that wanted to make it, or I would find something wrong with the talent that wanted to jump on board. And I couldn't see what I was doing. Like, I thought I was just highly critical. No, that's self-sabotage. I was a disaster artist. And we can do the same thing in life. Like, the relationship that starts to get intimate, we can crush it before they see into us too clearly. So don't be a disaster artist in your work and in your life. All right, so another one that I've come to terms with is the more you know, the less, that's not what I wrote. The less you know, the better it'll probably be. I'm someone who very much likes control on my terms, And I think that's where I was attracted to screenwriting to begin with. Well, I would often hear dialogue and I would hear characters, as like tangential versions of myself. And so it was how I could weave things in. But I also really liked screenwriting because it had sort of a structure to it that you knew how to navigate your way forward a little bit. There were like goalposts along the way with movies. And I really liked that. I really liked the bumper rails of the bowling alley. And unfortunately, when you like structure, when you like control that much, you can very easily get stuck at the stage of, well, this won't work, so let's scrap it. And what I found is like that control of like knowing where you're going and like knowing how it'll end can actually be really dangerous and toxic to something creative. Again, that got wiped out when I came out of the other side of London. Suddenly now I'm getting these creative downloads that are powerful and cool and visual, but I don't know what they are and I don't know what they mean. I have no control all of a sudden, and I don't know how to shape these things. I don't know what to make of any of it. I'm not just seeing characters and hearing dialogue. This is like a totally different terrain. And I should be excited about it, but because I loved control so much, like I wanted to know what it wanted to be. And sometimes you gotta have to wade through the unknown with stuff for a lot longer than you'd like. George Saunders talks about it a lot with his short story writing. He's like one of the best short story writers. 10th of December is one of the best books. And he said in an interview, he'll put a story away for months and then come back to it and be like, okay, now what do you want to be? He just asks the story politely, which I love. I think it's great. I wish I had that patience and ability to sustain the unknown. I think our control and our like needing to know how it'll turn out is really bad. It's not fun. It's like creativity sits on the other side of that fence that you've put up in your mind. And so does an interesting, expansive life. Because I think needing to know how something will go, it denies you the element of surprise. It denies you the better version that could show up that the universe wanted to drop in. You know, a lot of times things go wrong and we're like, well, I'll just fix it this way. And it's like, or just wait. Just wait. Something better might be dropping into your lap in a minute. But your need to like fix it right now because of the need for control, you could be getting the less cool version of it than if you just waited for a minute. It's like that old adage, like if you know the path, you're probably on the wrong path. You're probably on someone else's path. That's definitely not it. I'm butchering that one, but it's something like that. If you can see the path, you're probably on someone else's path. Something like that. What I've found is like there's such better options outside of what my mind wants it to be. And just being in the unknown with life, with yourself, with your creative project. I mean, for me, I am my creative project. Like they're one and the same. And so you have to kind of be in the unknown with your creative life. And that can be really uncomfortable, especially for those of us, you know, that never had that bed of stability to begin with. But try it. Give it a go. I dare you. Don't eat the raw chicken. Another one that I really love and I'll stand by is that when, I don't know why I said I love it. It's been devastating. When the well has dried up, it's time to go find a different well. For all my millennials out there, I think a lot of us are like pivoting in careers and in our journeys on this earth. And I say a lot of times, stop trying to make fetch happen. Like I always hear that quote from Mean Girls. Because it's like, I have been trying to make fetch happen for too long. So when I came back from the UK, when my show fell apart, I was still trying to make fetch happen. I was trying to drink out of a dried up well. The screenwriting industry was on a lockdown because there was a writer's strike. I couldn't even have gotten a job if I wanted to. And yet I was still trying to make it happen. And this applies to life. It's like, you know, when something is expired, you know, when you don't have, it doesn't mean hard, it doesn't mean difficult, but you know, when a relationship has expired, you know, when it's become inert and there's no life force in it anymore. And the same thing happens with our creative projects. And everyone's like, the power of the pivot. They make it sound so easy, but it's really hard when I don't know why I just got emotional. This is so dumb. But I think because it was my life raft out of that crazy house. And so you're like, this is my life raft. Don't take away my life raft. Especially when there's no other flotation devices around you. You're just out there in the ocean with yourself. But that's probably the point, you know. Anyway. You gotta find a new flotation device. And then this is a big one that no one likes, but you can't force it. Like people say, you can't force the timing of your life. And Yeah. And you also can't force the understanding of your projects. I have had this project. So like, for example, my creative stuff now downloads, like the best visual I could give you is like a rainforest, one of those rainforest shower heads, where for the past couple of years this project that I'm dealing with now has been coming like that, and it's, you don't know where anything goes. Like if each droplet of water is a part of it, but you don't know where in the order, you don't know what it is, you don't know where anything goes. You don't even know if it's all in the same project. It could be separate projects. You just don't know. It's creative chaos. And the other thing is it's come over time. And where I find myself getting into a contentious state with it is that I keep wanting to know what it is. I keep wanting to know where it's going. And I keep wanting out of this season of waiting for it to fully download. And you don't get to control that. And that's just like, I think that dancing with the creative divine is a waiting game sometimes. And just like these seasons in our life where we have waiting seasons in life, it's like you wait and you wait and you wait and you can't see that. You just feel like you're sitting in an empty theater, but that curtain that's closed, you can't see that, like the set change that's going on behind the curtain. And that's why nothing happens for a long time. We just think we're working hard and not seeing any results, and then suddenly everything kicks in at once. Like suddenly the download everything makes sense, everything lines up, suddenly there's clarity. And if you hadn't been doing the kind of busy work along the way that's frustrating, you wouldn't be ready to go right now. And that applies to whatever creative project you're working on, but also your life. I think a lot of people think creativity is for a select few, and really creativity is our birthright, and it's within all of us if you allow it forth. I think creativity is like our dance with the divine, and we're entitled to it. We're entitled to joy. We can't forget that, like, you're allowed to enjoy your life. You're allowed to let life surprise you. I've gotten really big into TCM, like traditional Chinese medicine, over the years because it's really healed me. But more so because I like the unity. Like there's such a cohesion between how the organs and nature and the elements and the regions of the body, the meridians, they all talk to one another. There's like this sort of like mandala of health that the traditional Chinese medicine doctors abide by. They're like, show me your tongue. And it's like, what do you see? But they can tell things about your spleen from your tongue. It's incredible. It's almost just fascinating because you're like, it feels like a magic trick. You want to know how it works. But anyway, I also like the symbolism of a lot of it. And in TCM, your spirit is housed in your heart, and it's called the Shen. And this is like your creative joy, like your spirit, like your joy. And if you have too much fire in your heart, you go into like mania, like craziness. But if you don't have enough, you go into depression. So you want to keep your Shen in the right place. And when I think people say like Joseph Campbell, he was a philosopher that was always saying, follow your bliss. Follow your bliss. It's how you find your purpose, but it's also how you communicate with the divine. Because the things that light us up, the things that give us spirit, the things that come from the heart, they were put there on purpose. To be filled with spirit is like a very divine thing. So when we think about the creative approaches we make in our life, like being more creative is not a selfish act. It's how we're meant to live. When people say follow your heart, they're saying follow your spirit. They're not saying like be a martyr and do what is miserable and painful and slog through life. That's not raising the vibration of the planet. But yeah, like, I don't know. Follow your bliss. It's like free drugs, you know? Make yourself happy. Knock yourself out. Do it. And the other thing is, if you have come from a crazy house, and this took me a while to understand, but like so much of my creative pursuit was actually not about creativity at all. It was about earning rewards and accolades and love. When you wipe all that out and creativity is rerouted to a purposeful place in your life, you now have the new task of learning what it is you really want and learning what it is that really brings you joy. And I'll tell you, when you come from a crazy house where you've never had time to sit in that place of just focusing on what you like, you don't know what your passions are. You don't know what your interests are. So I think taking time to explore those things is super vital because, again, behind them is our spirit, which is like your antenna to the divine. That's your antenna to the universe. You got to take time to sit with that. It's a big one. I'm still doing it. I'm still like, what do I like? Like, what do I love? What gives me like severe joy? How do I get max joy and pleasure out of healthy things? And for me, it's like being in flow. When things kick in and they make sense and you're like riding that wave, follow that wave. There's something really divine on the other side of it. Which brings me to my other one. Get off your phone. Just get off your phone. That one's pretty straightforward. That's a real creativity killer right there. And a vibe killer. Attention is everything. Attention and creativity go hand in hand. Simone Weil is one of my favorite. She died in the 60s, I think. She was like a radically compassionate philosopher. Born into wealth, still went and like worked in the factories to be with like the average person to like understand their plight. I mean, she fought in the Spanish Civil War. This woman was just incredible. She was like a modern Joan of Arc. But basically, my favorite quote of hers, because it's so spot on, is that attention taken to its highest degree is the same thing as prayer. It presupposes faith and love. Absolute undivided attention is prayer. And so just think about like what we give our attention to and how frequently we're divesting that attention. Because if you really boil down my thesis here, I think creativity and God are the same thing. They're the same frequency. Creativity is just our conversation with the divine in us. And I think being present with whatever brings us joy and inspiration is like having a chat with God. And I think the more open and attentive to that state you can be, the more life you'll have, the bigger life you'll have, if that makes sense. So I'm a big proponent of creativity if you haven't figured that out by now. And trying to get back so that, I mean, if all this tells you anything, it's like having your creativity drastically change on you is like having your toolkit taken away and then having a new one presented to you, but you don't know where it is. Like you don't know where to find it. It's in the room somewhere. You just don't know how to access it. And so I've had to like recalibrate my antenna to the divine. And it's more powerful now, but it definitely took a minute of getting used to bringing my attention back to something instead of escaping. It's like only after you come out of survival and you really sit with being present that you can learn to like find something really original in your field, in your mind, in your heart. It's like you're given this sort of intangible, energetic kiss from the divine, which is a really pleasant way to put it. So yeah, I mean, we could say this is all just me moving into my Enya phase. But I think I'm throwing out the old structured. I think that the need for structure is such a masculine, not a bad way. Like we need structure. We need structure. Trust me, I need structure. But leading with that mentality, not required. Not required anymore. Once I found structure within myself, you then have the capacity to go out and find what's in the ether around you. But I don't want to lead with structure anymore. It's just way less interesting. I don't think Enya writes her songs starting with structure. So if I have convinced you of anything this week, it is to put down your phone and to get curious about your creative armpit. Get curious about what makes you feel creative. And it could be anything. I met somebody on the street the other day that was like, yeah, I was a therapist for 15 years and then I quit and suddenly became a carpenter on boats. And I was like, I get it. I deeply get it. We did say no more. Like he just wanted to work with wood and make something out of it. And I was like, work with your hand. I get it. I wouldn't want to listen to people's problems anymore either. Just, there's nothing indulgent. There's nothing wrong with being a little more focused on your joy and a little less focused on the people destroying the world right now. So indulge in those moments. That's a prayer. That is a prayer. Yeah, that's my spiel on creativity. I hope we all find a way to incorporate more of it into the landscape. It's that, or like start a homestead, which I'm also down for. Although I just don't have any experience. I was talking to my accountant today, and she basically has a homestead in Arizona. And I was like, well, do you need anybody to come live on it? She was like, gotta go, bye. So maybe that's my new creative exploration. All of a sudden, I'm like into solar panels and like chicken coops and land. I'm like, how much land you got? How many acres? Anyway, this has been real. Thanks for hearing me out on my creative soapbox. Hey, here's something creative you could do. Subscribe to Strange Orphan. If you're listening, if you're this deep into the show, for this many episodes in, you have no excuse to not like and subscribe. I'm here for you, except for last week. Be here for me. All right. I love you guys very much. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you next week. Take care.